All right, so we're diving into the world of 1984 with these excerpts. Um, get ready, I guess, to explore like a world where somebody's always listening, Big Brother's always listening, and where history can be like rewritten and where even thoughts are policed.
Yeah, and what I think is so fascinating about Orwell's Dystopia
Yeah.
is that, I mean, this isn't some far-off future, Like,
Mhm.
he paints this picture of Oceania using details that are kind of unsettlingly familiar.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's those everyday details like that make it so creepy. Like just that description of Winston's apartment building, Victory Mansion. It's called Victory Mansions, but it's like this rundown place, and there's always this smell of boiled cabbage in the hallway.
Exactly. Orwell is such a master of using those sensory details, right? Like, he doesn't just tell us about this oppressive atmosphere, he makes us feel it.
Hmm.
Like the grime, the decay, the ever-present kind of, like, taste of gin in the air.
And that gin, Victory Gin, it's more than just a drink, right?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a tool. Like, keep the citizens kind of, mildly intoxicated, dull their senses a little bit, and they're less likely to notice, like, the cracks in the party's facade. They're not going to rebel if they're feeling good.
Subtle. But Orwell doesn't just use like sensory manipulation, does he? There's that whole twisted logic of newspeak and doublethink, like even language is a weapon.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you take the concept of Crime Stop, for instance. It's not enough to just censor dissenting thoughts in Oceania. They want to eliminate the capacity for independent thought altogether.
Yeah.
So Crime Stop is basically like self-censorship before a thought can even fully form.
So it's like your brain is like stopping itself from committing a crime by
Right.
even thinking something outside the party line. It's insidious.
Precisely. And this is where I think Orwell's genius really comes through. Like, he understood that in order to control a society, you control its language, right?
Yeah.
You control the very structure of how people think.
Which brings us to doublethink. This is where it gets really interesting. How can someone possibly hold two completely contradictory beliefs at the same time?
Yeah, it's definitely a form of mental gymnastics. There's no doubt about that. But Orwell shows us how, with enough effective propaganda and constant fear, people can be conditioned to accept the most outrageous contradictions as truth.
And in this environment, even the smallest act of defiance becomes incredibly significant, like Winston's decision to start a diary.
Think about that for a second, right?
Mm.
In this world that's saturated with telescreens where even your thoughts are suspect, just the act of writing something down, that becomes an act of rebellion. Like, every word is a risk. Every sentence is a declaration of individuality.
And it's through those diary entries that we really begin to understand the extent of the party's control. The manipulation of history, the rewriting of the past, it's all designed to keep the citizens in this perpetual state of uncertainty.
And that uncertainty breeds fear. Fear of stepping out of line, fear of questioning, fear of your own thoughts.
It's a vicious cycle, isn't it? The party creates the fear, and then they use that fear to justify their control.
Exactly. And it's a cycle that's, I mean, it's all too familiar even today, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about how easily misinformation and propaganda can spread, how fear and uncertainty, it's used all the time to manipulate public opinion.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, what are the subtle ways that language and information are being used to shape our own thoughts and perceptions? What are the telescreens in our own lives?
That's the power of Orwell. He forces us to, like, look beyond the surface, to question the narratives that we're being told and to really examine how power operates in our world.
And speaking of power, let's talk about Winston's act of rebellion. I mean, that diary might seem insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it sets in motion this, like, chain of events that is going to challenge the party's authority in ways that he could never have imagined. So we left off with Winston and his little act of rebellion, that diary. But his rebellion, it, like, takes a turn when another character comes in, Julia.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about Julia is she's like a different kind of rebel. Like Winston, he's drawn to the big ideas, right? Trying to figure out why the party does what it does. But Julia, she's more instinctive. Like, she just wants to live life on her own terms.
So she's not like some revolutionary, not in the political sense anyway.
Exactly. Think about it. The party, their whole thing with sex, it's like totally controlled,
Yeah.
right? It's only for making more party members. It's like your duty, not about pleasure. Julia,
Yeah.
she rejects all that.
And rejecting that, even in this personal way, it's kind of huge, isn't it?
Huge. Think about those rendezvous they have. Sneaking off to the countryside, no telescreens. That's a big screw you to the party.
Yeah, it's more than just like sneaking around them.
Way more.
Yeah.
It's like in those stolen moments, they get a taste of what could be, like what it means to actually connect with another person. Remember that line, Winston's looking at Julia and he thinks she'd become a physical necessity, something that he not only wanted but felt he had a right to. That's powerful.
Yeah, like we all need that connection, that intimacy. It's human, but I mean, come on, this is dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. They're playing with fire, no doubt. They could get caught at any second. The thought police,
Yeah.
right. It's like this constant weight over everything.
Even that room above Mr. Charrington's shop, that's supposed to be their safe space.
Right, but even that's an illusion. Orwell's point is that nowhere is safe. Big Brother is everywhere. It's like, even when things seem hopeful, look out.
And then, of course, they're captured, separated. And that brings us to Room 101. Chillin' stuff. Why is that place so terrifying?
Well, think about it. Torture. That's like dictatorship 101. But Orwell, he knew that real control. It's about breaking you on the inside. Room 101, it's not about pain. It's about using your worst fear against you. It makes you betray who you are just to make it stop.
And for Winston, it's rats. Like down in your soul fear of rats.
Exactly. It's primal, right?
Yeah.
And that's what makes him turning on Julia so awful. It's like his worst nightmare versus the woman he loves. He shatters.
And then, that ending. That awful ending. They're released, but it's like they're empty. He says, but it was all right. Everything was all right. The struggle was finished. He had won the victory over himself. He loved Big Brother. I mean, what do you even do with that? It's like he's been through hell and back, and he comes out the other side loving the thing that destroyed him. It's messed up.
But that's exactly how the party works, right?
Yeah.
They don't want people to just toe the line. They want total mental domination. Like Winston saying he loves Big Brother. That's not real love. That's brainwashing. They broke him, and then they put him back together the way they wanted him to be.
It's chilling. And Julia, too. Like, they run into each other at the end, and she's just as empty as he is.
Totally. The party won. They took these two people who had something real, who challenged the rules, and they crushed them.
It's bleak, man. But, like, throughout the book, there are these glimpses of a different way of life. Like, the proles. Winston put so much hope in them. Like, maybe they hold the key to change. Was he wrong?
Remember that part with the old man in the pub? Winston's trying to get him to remember what life was like before the party, but the old man's memories are all jumbled. Like, the past doesn't even matter anymore because the party controls it.
So the proles, with their traditions and stuff, they have this kind of freedom, but they don't even realize it.
Yeah, exactly. They live outside the party's structure, but not because they're fighting against it. It's more like they're just trying to survive. Orwell describes them as like cattle turned loose on the plains of Argentina.
So, like, if language is twisted, history's a lie, and thinking for yourself is a crime, can you even fight back? Or is Winston's ending like a preview of what's to come?
That's the scary question Orwell leaves us with. 1984 isn't just a story, it's a warning. We got to pay attention to how power works, how easily truth can be manipulated, because if we don't, we could end up like Winston.
Heavy stuff. So, as we kind of step out of 1984 and back into reality, what do you hope people will take away from all of this?
I'd say question everything. Don't just accept what you're told, even if it seems legit. Words are powerful, and they can be used for good or for evil. And never, ever take for granted the right to think for yourself, to disagree, to have your own opinions. That's what makes us human, and it's something we got to defend.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us into 1984. It's one of those stories that sticks with you, makes you think about the choices we make every day and the world we're building for tomorrow.